Hey guys, and welcome back to Art a la Carte. In today's video, I want to talk to you guys about how to pick those colors that you need for skin tones. And there are a lot of different skin tones out there, so I'm going to do 4 different skin tones. I'm going to start off with a very kind of light pale complexion and then move progressively darker throughout the rest. I'm also going to give you a list of all the different Copic markers and give you a couple of tips on how to apply the color as we go. First and foremost, this is not a video on how to draw faces or even how to shade and really detailed on applying color. If you want more information about that, I'd like to recommend my Drawing People 101 playlist. I go through a lot of the features on that, and I'll put a link to that video in the description box below. I'll try to leave a list of all the colors either during the video while I'm creating it, or at the very end I'm going to show you the full list of colors that I used, and I'll give you a link where you can find a picture of that on my website as well. So the first thing I do is take the lightest tone. So for this one, I'm using E50, and I just kind of place it in where all the highlights are. Then I work from lightest to darkest. So I'm going to go with my next one, which is E51, and I'm going to begin to build in the shadows. The thing with working with color, whether it's Copic, color pencils, watercolor, is to slowly build up your colors. Don't just take one color for one thing. In the face, there can be several different colors. For this one here, I'm going to use at least 5 different colors, and I'm going to slowly build those up to kind of give it a really great depth and a lot of good blend. Another trick to know is with Copic markers, when you apply the color, it's always going to appear darker until it begins to dry, and as it dries, it lightens up a little bit. So sometimes as I'm adding darker colors, like here I'm using E21, it's really dark, but as it dries, you're going to see that it will lighten significantly. Now, if while you're applying the color to the face, you see a really harsh line and you don't want that harsh line, a trick you can do is to pull in one of your lighter shades. So I go back in with my E50 and I blend that out over the Copics, and that works great with Copic markers. Depending on what medium that you choose to use, you're going to kind of have to figure out how that works and how well they blend together. Some tips with shading is to first obviously know where your light source is coming from. On all these girls, I'm going to have the light kind of a diffuse light, so there's not going to be a really harsh defined shadow, but it's just going to be kind of coming from the front, just like if they're outside. So I'm going to pull in some shadows in places that I want to push back features, like towards the sides of the face, to kind of make the face look a little bit more round, and then around the eyes, under the nose, under the lips, and under the chin to kind of define between the chin, the neck, and the face. Of course, it does look a little bit weird without the eyes and hair done. I thought about doing those first and then putting in the skin tones afterwards, but I really wanted our focus on this video to be on the skin tones themselves, so you'll see the hair and the eyes kind of just pop in there magically at some point. Right now I'm going back through with my lighter shade and just kind of blending out those other tones. Another thing you can use for shading is not just to stick with a darker shade of whatever skin tone that is, but try to use a purple or a light blue to kind of create that gradient shade. So for this one, I'm using a V91, which is just a really soft purple color. It's a really desaturated, so it's not vibrant. I don't want like big purple streaks on her face, but it's kind of almost grayish, and that kind of cools things off and adds a really nice shaded skin tone to that. So now let's move on to the second face. Here's a really quick look at the colors I'm going to be using in this face. And also from this point on, I'm speeding up the footage because each one of these faces is taking me anywhere from 6 to 7 minutes to do, and I don't want this to be, a half an hour long video. So I'm going to speed this up, but same process applies. I start lightest and work darker. You're going to see some places that I dab in some colors really darkly, like around the corners of the mouth, the corners of the eyes, and it's really dark. What I'm doing is I'm letting the color sit there for a second, and because I know how this medium works, I know if I go back in with that lighter shade, I can blend it out. Other markers, it might not work so well with that, so definitely you want to test that out with whatever medium you're using before you attempt it. Otherwise, you're going to have polka dots on your face. So the third face that we're going to use, now we're getting much darker. This could be someone from a Latin American country, a Native American, India, things like that, having a really nice rich complexion. I'm going with a lot warmer tones. I have E11, E13, E33, and then I'm using a V22 to kind of add a little bit of shading. Some other tips with this is don't be afraid of your values. Don't be afraid to let your highlights be light and your darks be dark. I find a lot of times when people are beginning to practice this out that they tend to make everything the same shade. Don't do that. Make sure that you have those highlights and those shadows so that you get a nice variety. For the last face, I'm going to really push to have a nice dark complexion. So the colors I'm going to use is an E33 for my lightest tone. I'll use an E18, an E27, E39, and E79 throughout this. I'm also letting this be a lot blockier. I'm really blocking out, defining my darkest darks and my lightest lights, and then blending them in together. This one was a little bit more challenging for me to keep those highlights, but once I went in with my darkest shade, which was the E79, it really defined those out and kind of pulled the highlights out as well. And again, if you find that their lines are just a little too crisp, a little too strong, go back in with that lighter shade and you can kind of smooth those lines out a little bit. This is something that definitely will take a little bit of practice. So to help you guys out, I'll put a link in the description box below where you can find this actual printed out sheet. You can print this out, practice coloring it yourself. I'm going to give you a quick rundown list of all the colors I use just in case I didn't mention them in the video. Obviously, I don't have all the Copic markers, so if there's a Copic marker that you really love to use for skin tone, you don't see it in my collection, would you let me know in the comment section so that I can mark that on my list as Copics to purchase. But if you're beginning your Copic collection and you're thinking, well, which colors, I mean, obviously I can't buy them all right now, which colors would I choose? Here are the top 6 colors that I would choose to have a well-rounded skin tone collection. I would purchase the E00, E11, E13, E33, E27, and R00. Those would be my skin tone colors. Now this obviously doesn't take into account the cooler shading tones like the V20 and the V22. These are just strictly the skin tones. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if there's something else that you would be interested in seeing a video on. And until next time, God bless you guys, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye!